into the heart of the work that we're doing. So with that, Carly, would you like to advance to the next slide in our set? We were just learning all about some additional Zoom logistics that we might not have included before. So thank you all for that learning opportunity. And our meeting agenda today, as I said, this is our final meeting together, and we'll spend most of our times again in our breakout groups. But we want to have a significant portion of time also for each of the groups to have about 5 minutes to report out on their final recommendations and next steps. So we'll break out into our academic programming, physical instructional environment, social, emotional, and behavior groups and sub-breakout groups. And then when we do that group share out, this is going to be another learning opportunity. Those spokespeople for each of the groups are going to share their screen so that we can all see the recommendations that the group decides to share in that final share out period. So we'll coach each other through that as well if we haven't done that before. As always, our norms are really about hearing each other's voices, having space for each other's voices, appreciating the perspectives and the knowledge that each of us brings, and as we were already doing, enjoy our time together for sure. So again, we want to have our designated roles in the breakout groups. We want to review and revise those recommendations that you have been working on, to provide each other feedback and do some final edits before we do that group share out. As it says, when you have about 10 minutes left in the breakout period, do identify any next steps that the group needs to take in order to complete your recommendations. And then that 5-minute presentation by sharing your screen, and that will kind of wrap up the activities for today. So we kind of hinted at this, and we actually have this on a slide a little bit later, but our deadline we had originally shared of June the 18th to submit final recommendations. We really need to actually speed that up, and Monday the 15th would be the last day that we would want to be receiving any additional recommendations after we conclude our time this afternoon. We're kind of a little bit more on a fast track, and hopefully, Gary, that answers your initial question as well. We are here at June 11th, meeting 4, and by Tuesday morning, we need to be combining our recommendations and looking through all of that information to point towards a more final version of the recommendations from both the Montana Flex and the Montana Learn task forces. So thank you for being sensitive to that slightly speeded up schedule, and just know that the work that we're doing this afternoon in getting those recommendations to their close to final form is really, really critical. So with that, are there any questions about what our focus and our goals are for today? Or any other questions for the good of the order?
Great. And I just want to start off by thanking everyone in their groups. It was just such encouraging and great collaboration and coordination over the past 4 weeks, and I've learned a ton. So I just want to thank you all, and thank my group in particular. It was a great experience. So we'd love to start off if academic programming number 1 would be up for starting. I'll still probably hold you to a 5-minute timeline. I know that will be quick, but thank you. And if you could share your screen so that maybe for those who are more of a reader can read along what you wrote.
Yep, I'm getting it set up.
Great.
It says that it disabled my screen.
I wonder.
It said host.
Oh. Now try.
Okay, hold on. Hopefully I have the right one.
You were right. It was set to host only.
Oh, okay. Here we go. This should be it. I hope I have the updated one. Let me double. It should be good. Okay. So I'll go through this really quick. We kind of do a preamble at the very beginning. And then as we go through on our academic programming, we will go back down to our best practice. As you can see, we have determine a single platform for online learning by grade band. And you can see we have some recommendations, but I'll keep this short and sweet so we don't run out of time. The other best practice is we go into standardized electronic calendar expectations, create a consistent instructional communication plan. I think we can all agree that communication was very different for everybody. Hold on, my computer's gonna go dead. Create or provide parents, families, students, and teachers with clear, concise guidance for online interactions. Let's scroll down. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, then have a clear, acceptable use plan for the use of district devices and technology. One-stop shop, develop a central knowledge base to provide information to all students and community members. Parent communication, who, what, when, and where. Define parent and teacher responsibilities. I think making sure that parents have an idea of what is expected as far as the homework. Provide weekly opportunities, whether you need one-on-one, we need to record things previously, just so everybody is on the same page. Provide guidelines and lesson delivery methods. Create a plan for assessment across grade levels and disciplines. Consider equity issues in all decision making. That was definitely very important. And if you haven't noticed, our third column would be ideas and places that we actually have, whether it's links to these informational resources, which we will solidify by Monday. So as you can see, we have resources with question marks, but we will fine tune that. And I believe we got it. Was that all of it? No. I want to make sure I got everything.
That was all of the
Okay.
big level recommendations. Right. Yes.
Okay. Got it.
That was great, Paige. Thank you so much. At least it was helpful for me to see how you organized your information as well. All right, so our next group will be Academic Programming 2. And so I think, Dylan, you're sharing.
Actually, I think Jennifer is going to share.
Sorry, Jennifer.
Dylan Huskin.
Oh yeah, sorry, Dylan H. There we go.
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, so yeah, I'm sharing my screen, everybody. Hi, I'm Dylan. I teach out in Bonner. So our group focused on content and standards and moving away from traditional letter grading, especially in a remote or blended environment, and moving towards research-based grading practices, perhaps standard-based grading. And so we broke this into 4 priority concepts about how to get this done. And these are our recommendations for how to start the school year, regardless of it's fully in-person, blended, or strictly remote, so that districts can be consistent, especially if there's a flare-up later on in the school year and we do have to suddenly close. Then we can keep going without this huge disruption of what do we do now, and there'll be a lot less scrambling. So districts should really consider just starting their school year this way. So our first priority concept with moving towards standard-based grading, or more moving away from traditional letter grades, is high-quality instruction, assessment, and reporting. And we talked about how districts should really figure out how to figure out what unfinished learning occurred last year towards the end, in the spring of 2020. Figure out some priority standards or benchmarks, or maybe what we call power standards, and how we're going to embed those into their new grade level. And then figure out how we're going to grade the students on those standards, and give them effective, immediate feedback so that they can step up and learn what they need to. So there's a lot of more nuance there, but I'll just go to our next priority concept, which is communication. So if we're using standard-based grading or more research-based grading that requires good, effective feedback and connection, districts really need to figure out how they're going to communicate with families and how they're going to educate families on these platforms, on the new technology, and then just what is standards-based grading and why isn't your kid getting A, B, C, or D anymore? And what does it mean when you get that report card that says your student was proficient in this, advanced in this, developing in that? And so really figuring out how to get consistent with communication. We talked about districts really stepping up and providing a way for teachers to communicate with parents in a very clear way. And so if that means using something like Google Voice, where students can call a number that will lead to a teacher's cell phone, even though it's not that teacher's personal cell phone number, so that teachers can actually be reached, or if there's just a very consistent internet online way to do it, that districts need to step up and pay for that. Make sure the districts are setting some sort of communication calendar so every student is being reached. Staff are checking their email and responding, but they're not being overwhelmed, and parents aren't being overwhelmed, and setting norms about when communication can occur. And then our third concept was consistent instructional platform. That one is pretty short. Basically, whatever platform you choose for your district, make sure your teachers are trained on it, your families are trained on it, the students are trained on it, and then you use it consistently, whether remotely, blended, or in person. And then our last one is professional development. The big thing we want to stress there is we need to hire more counselors. If we're going to require teachers to learn a bunch of new things and families to learn a bunch of new things, carving out time to do that, maybe that's more PIR days before school starts, or maybe it's paying teachers for their time if they're coming in before PIR days. And that is pretty much it. We also talked about setting up a mentor program for both veteran teachers and new teachers, just anyone who really needs to learn something new quickly, or just needs somebody to bounce ideas off of in order to cope with this massive change in education. So yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dylan. We were following along with you, but I don't know if your screen was like scrolling, but that's okay. I think it's no worries. We're with you. So thank you so much for sharing for academic too. So let's move on to the social, emotional, and behavioral group to share what your recommendations look like so far.
Okay, can you see that screen okay?
Yep.
All right. My name is Sarah Novak, and I am a special ed director, and I was happy to be part of this group. It was a great group to work with, and we cranked out lots of information and had lots of good conversation. So first of all, we just have some references that will be noted in the document. But basically, we looked at our recommendations on what it would look like, and our first choice would be in-person instruction. Second choice would be a blended model, and third choice would be remote learning. And then we broke it down into the different categories as far as what each of these groups need in terms of social, emotional, behavioral support. So first of all, we kind of club teachers and administration together. So there's some things that one or the other would have to individually be responsible for, and then there's others that is a collaborative effort. So the main thing in there is that we have an emphasis on social emotional learning in the realm of professional development as well as resources and technical assistance. So that the teachers and the schools have the tools that they need to support the students as well as each other. Focuses on suicide prevention. Some of the programs that we had found out about and made note of are Show Dare Connect, which is for educators. They can call in 2 times a week and have their educational professionals that focus in the mental health world. They can just bounce ideas off of them and kind of get some support for what they're dealing with on a specific situation. Then YBGR, Yellowstone Boys and Girls Ranch, also has their Connect program. Trauma-informed practices are considered best practices and highly recommended to be integrated into schools. Restorative practices, online resources, potential resources coming from national partners like CASEL. Montana 211 is a support that was noted oftentimes in different areas throughout our work. And then the second part of that, after you get out of the social emotional learning, professional development, is educator self-care. So a focus on self-care for teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals, basically anyone that's an educator or working in the school capacity. Online trainings that would be available in regards to self-care, as well as utilizing and knowing about what community supports are available. The third thing under teachers and administrators was a common theme that kept coming up is just making sure platforms for connecting are secure and in compliance with privacy needs, and that they're streamlined so that we don't have a whole bunch of different platforms being used at the same time. So we recommend that we should be utilizing electronic resources for small group work, and at the same time balancing that and limiting screen time for teachers as well as the students. And we had just talked about how Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting just it wears on you, and that there's you know, some information that's coming forward about that now and the effects on the body. So overall, we just really want to reinforce social emotional needs, that they have to be met. There should be a priority and a preference there. Another comment is that elective courses should not be lost. They're important for the social emotional behavior aspect of students. Some students struggle in the mainstream, and that's what keeps them in school and allows them to have some sense of success. Structured time for students to meet with educators. So on a side note with that, teachers need to be doing teaching and instruction. So all of the instruction shouldn't fall on the parents or whoever, or the students themselves in a remote setting. There has to be structured time to meet with educators, as well as have the educators deliver the instruction. And then I'll just bounce back up here. Sorry, I know I'm scrolling all over the place. So for students, some concerns that we have for students, or that students would need, they need to be looped into conversations with administration and school boards. We were lucky to have students on our committee, and they gave very valuable information and helped drive a lot of this. Most students think that they're going to go back to the school building full-time in the fall, and if they don't, they feel like that will be another grieving point, and so it needs to be communicated. They need to have some forewarning of what it might look like, so they're prepared for that. And we also had a conversation about, you know, letting them know versus at least acknowledging that that is a concern, and it needs to be acknowledged at the school level. Students' ability to socialize with peers, not just focus on academics, is a key to their wellness. So holding focus groups for students to share and provide feedback on decisions, so such as them participating in this group, and then bringing that to a more local level, as well as school boards are looking at recommendations and what they're going to move, how they're going to proceed and move forward. Limited screen time is recommended again. Time for instruction, as well as time for independent work, and balancing that. Social emotional learning curriculum needs to be implemented for teaching resilience to all students. So we talk about the professional development, so the teachers have their knowledge, but the students need to have that knowledge base as well. So actually implementing some social emotional learning curriculum, and not just targeting our high needs students or our most at risk, but making that available to all. Streamlining communications, this is the multiple platforms again, just making sure that they have one central place to go to get their information so that they can stay more organized and kind of minimize that anxiety and stress. Students need clear direction, plan, and schedules of their work. Opportunities to work with others need to be incorporated, whether it's instruction or activities. We talked about some specific examples of structured games like trivia and bingo that are online, Jackbox TV, EA Sports was mentioned. So incorporating that in as well with their academics. Utilizing peer-to-peer strategies with adult support. And then some of the other ones that have come up before, the YBGR Connect, Montana 211, and then access to elective courses, making sure that they're not lost, that they are just as important for the social emotional well-being. And then our final category is families and communities. So open lines of communication both ways. A lot of districts right now are surveying families and community partners, and this is critical for a holistic approach. Families need to feel heard. A number of families are stating that if students don't return to school full-time, they don't want to homeschool them on their days off. So understanding those work-life priorities and making sure that all students have access. Families don't feel capable of teaching their own children, and that is looped back into that teachers needing to provide that instruction. And it's important to set a routine that's predictable for students and families. We talked a lot about wraparound services and how that's vital to the success of so many students and families alike. And that those wraparound services really need to support that trauma-informed education. And these can be provided through community mental health providers as well. The Montana 211 is available as well. Supporting family voice and creating opportunities to share with one another, peer-to-peer support. Looking at a systematic analysis of mental health and well-being supports for all school stakeholder groups and subgroups. And we just noted some of those: YBGR Connect, parentingmontana.org, and the Montana Empowerment Center. Helping parents understand relevance of social media and other virtual tools. We talked about having students provide trainings. So they're student-led as far as the updates in social media and technology so that everybody can be on the same page. And then other trauma-informed resources, aligning approaches with after-school programs, mental health providers, community health care organizations, really just using a community-centered approach so that everybody's involved. And then when we looked at supplies that were needed, we just talked about social emotional behavior supports need to be scheduled alongside of academics, and we need Maslow before Bloom. The basic needs have to be met. We talked about counselors needing to be available and hold scheduled times to meet with students, whether it's face-to-face or virtual. And really, overall, the big thing is that all things need to be equitable for all students. So how can we level that playing field and make sure that nobody's falling behind or being left out?
Thank you, Sarah and Social Emotional Group. This was very helpful to listen in on. And I know you probably have a couple other components, but we will definitely get that out as soon as possible so that everyone can finish reading. Is that okay, Sarah?
Yeah, that's really the end of it right there. So truancy was the only thing I didn't touch on. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. And so our next group is the Physical Instructional Environment, Group 1.
Okay, so this is Molly Barta. I guess I'm going to share for us. So I'll give you my screen here. Okay, so when we first started, we brainstormed challenges and opportunities that kind of helped us narrow our focus. And so there's our challenges and opportunities. I believe I talked about those last week. Since we're short on time, I'm gonna kind of try to be quick here. So the two areas we decided to focus on for those broad recommendations were sanitation and social distancing. So sanitation, we just talked about, limiting use of paper packets. And so then if we rely on technology, what do we need to do for those that do not have access to that? So, and schools will probably have to check out Chromebooks or have some sort of technology available for them to use, and provide training and resources on how to clean those items such as laptops and keyboards. Continue encouraging personal hygiene and hand washing. We said how, provide guidance to families on the structure of the school day. There's a lot of apprehension about what's coming up, so they need this information sooner rather than later. And we also discussed allowing more flexibility for sick days. So that was something important. We thought if they're sick, stay home. So, we thought it was also a good idea to notify parents that students will be sanitizing their own equipment and areas. I don't know, there could be things like allergies, things like that. So just to let them know that they would be doing that. We discussed how ventilation in classrooms could be a big issue, especially in music rooms where, the vocal music and instrumental music, those ventilation systems are important. And continuing on with sanitation, let's see here. Let's go straight down to blended. Develop procedures for sanitizing and disinfecting common use areas, and ensure that the passing areas, entryways, and hallways used by students allow for adequate social distancing. So some of these things can be a challenge for the bigger schools. So we do address that later on about how you may have to stagger bell times and things like that to address the large groups in the hallways. And we also recommend adjusting class sizes and classroom layouts to comply with social distancing recommendations, and conduct temperature check and system screening of student, staff, and employees before entering school using a non-contact thermometer, and provide education and training on safety measures, including wiping down and sanitizing areas. So, and then here's where we talked about the bell schedule. And we said that, you may have to allow time for hand washing and sanitizing. If it's a very large campus, many times there isn't time to go do that. So districts really need to look at things like that and decide if they do need to allow extra time for that. So I'm going to scroll down here. Okay, so then based on our beginning opportunities and challenges, we decided that there were 4 kind of main areas that we thought needed to be addressed specifically, and that was PE, music, lunch, and CTE. So for PE, I'm going to go straight down to in-person because they're all pretty much the same as the blended. So for PE, class size is a big one. Some PE classes, depending on the district, are quite large. Ensure hand washing occurs before and after. Encourage students to take home clothing used for PE class. Don't keep them in the locker rooms. Allow time for cleaning of shared equipment between classes. And locker rooms could be a big situation. So, promoting social distancing in those areas needs to be addressed by individual schools because, the boys' locker room, if you only have female teachers and so on, that could be an issue. And encourage outdoor and individual activities when possible, so you're not sharing so much equipment. And for PE and athletics, consider the current phase of the pandemic and whether competition is appropriate per MHSA guidelines. So then we went down to music, which includes vocal, instrumental, and general. So social distancing seems to be a big issue for the vocal and instrumental music classes, a little more so for vocal than instrumental, but they both are problem areas. So, you need to try to emphasize that social distancing according to spatial allowances and room size, allow for cleaning and sanitizing of equipment before and after use, talk about what it means to actually clean their instrument, what needs to be done to actually ensure that that happens. and make sure that those music kids are hand washing before and after those music classes. Then we went down to lunch, and the big thing we came up with was consider local or consult with local or county public health departments, because every school is so different. You know, some have school on site or lunch on site, some people don't. So that really does depend on that. So I'm not going to go through all this because we kind of talked about it last time, and it really does depend on the school size. So I'll just let you look at that while I scroll down. Self-serve stations and buffets are obviously an issue, so try to eliminate those. Designated entrance for those leaving campus for lunch. So when they come back, possibly do an additional temperature check or symptom monitoring. Then we went down to CTE and CTSOs. So CTE is things like business, family consumer science, tech ed, agriculture, and career and technical student organizations are things like BPA, FCCLA, FFA, I can't remember what the tech ed one is called, but I'm going to come down here. So symptomatic screening of students before and after events and out of school activities, the sanitizing, show them how to properly clean their space depending on which class they're in. Limit equipment sharing, and that can include things like hand tools, power equipment, culinary tools, computers, and especially protective gears. A lot of schools only have maybe a limited number of welding helmets, so that is a purchase that, you know, those schools probably need to make, is a few more of those so that everybody has their own. Limit class size to reduce the number of items used by multiple students, and again, adjust class size and classroom layouts to comply with the recommendations. And then we got into specifically the competitions and trips that our CTSO kiddos take, symptomatic screening of students before and after events, and sanitize before and after, and provide sanitizer stations at the entrance to classrooms when hosting events. And that's it.
Thank you, Molly. And last but not least, our physical instructional group 2. And then we have about 1 minute worth of information to share with you all before we close for this task force.
So we had some technical difficulties and we had great input. And as soon as we put some input, then we lost the other input. Patrice downloaded some great stuff that she had reported on last week about nutrition, and Reg was going to talk a little bit about recess and physical education.
I think this is Patrice. I think overall the guidance for school nutrition, it's first of all, school nutrition just needs versatility and multiple approaches to serving, and it will definitely be different for every district, and so that's something to really consider, including those people in discussions, especially where there's schedule changes, and just seek their input in the district-wide decisions. So maybe you could include them on your task force group or somehow seek out their input, because the load that they bear is unbelievable, and the schedules change without their notice. That could be really challenging. And then hopefully the directives that come from the, you know, the task force for the districts or wherever the powers to be are, that they are part of those decisions too. And so that's the latest. I think most of the guidance that I've put together for the I did one for the administrators, one for the one for the superintendents, one for the administrators, and one for the school nutrition directors, so they would all have some sort of a template to start with. Some of those considerations are the same from one to the next, but definitely need personal protective equipment. The USDA guidelines are a huge issue because those waivers are in place now, but we have no idea how that will play out in the fall. And then anticipating labor shortages is huge because we already can't find people to run the summer food program right now. So that's something to consider. And then reduce food availability because everyone is going to be searching out the same kinds of items. So probably all schools will want individually wrapped packaged items or something of that nature. So that's something to consider. And so basically really just stepping out of the box and considering what kind of service models might work the best. Like if it's grab and go or classroom service or curbside. And then just explore alternative serving spaces is kind of the other thing that we came up with.
Thanks, Patrice. This is Reg. I'll just kind of share this out with you, but I'll go through it really quick. I know that we're getting super short on time, but I just, have some real basic stuff talking about, really encouraging physical education outside where social distancing is much easier and ventilation is good. If you have to get into the gymnasium, make sure the doors and windows are open to the best degree. Locker rooms, depending on school size, is probably going to differ from some of the larger schools to some of the smaller schools. Some of the larger schools just aren't going to be able to use those locker rooms. There's not enough time to schedule kids in and out. So they're going to maybe encouraging kids, if, for example, a blended model, to dress in athletic clothes when they come to school instead of going around. We won't be sharing equipment, probably would be some of the guidelines. I'm not going to throw a ball to you and have you throw it back, that type of thing. We would use equipment that we could easily sanitize between periods. Talk a little bit about recess. We're going to probably not be able to use all the equipment. Definitely making sure that things that we do use can be sanitized in between. Maybe painting on our playgrounds so that we, students can see and have that visual representation of what good social distancing is in some areas, so they can continually have those references as they're playing, and that provides a good teaching environment for people that are helping kids and monitoring recesses as well. Games that require no physical contact, so having, teaching kids those things so that they can use those at recess as well. So that's just quick, but I know you guys need some time too, but those are just kind of some of the basics.
Thank you so much. And I know that each group has put so much work into this. And so I know we're wrapping up here quickly, but thank you all for your hard work. There's two things that we just quickly wanted to share with you before we wrap up officially. The first thing, and I believe you can see my screen hopefully, is that we love to continue this conversation with so many of you. And as things come up, please let us know. The first thing is that we do have a professional learning opportunity. We're going to be creating either different hub courses or things on the OPI side for professional learning. So if you're interested in giving feedback on professional learning, please feel free if you click on that link I just threw in the chat. And we also will be emailing this out in our email on Monday. But if you're interested in giving some feedback for professional learning, feel free to complete that Google form. And last but not least, please email me, marissa.graybill@mt.gov, your recommendations. So you can either email me your Google link, make sure that it's shareable and editable, ideally, or if you did a Word doc, just go ahead and upload that and email that over to me, and we will get that compiled. And sooner rather than later would be great, but by Monday would be awesome. And of course, any questions or concerns that come up, please email Colette. And we will be sending an email on Monday, just kind of wrapping this all up and asking for a survey and a little bit of feedback about how this process went. So if we do have to do something like this again, hopefully not as a pandemic, that we have a structure in place for a task force like this. So thank you all for your hard work, and so much gratitude to all your time and energy that went into this and continuing to going into this. And thank you for your feedback. And we couldn't have done this without each individual one of you. So thank you. We are 2 minutes over. And on that note, we will communicate with you soon, but thank you again for your hard work.
It seems funny to end abruptly, but we will not take up more time of yours this afternoon. Just know that as the guidance document is completed, that will be shared out with the task force. It will be posted to the OPI website, and you can always access the recordings of these meetings from the website as well. So thank you very much. I don't know if Dylan Klappmeyer, if you had anything else that you wanted to say. But again, don't want to hold everyone.
I don't. Thank you, Colette, and thank you everyone on this committee so much. Your insights have been incredibly valuable and is going to be beneficial in getting together this statewide guidance.
All right.
Well,
Thanks so much.